Hi, everyone. Welcome to the seventh episode of Fields Future podcast today. And today we have Dr. Reena Singh with us. Dr. Singh is the Senior Fellow Agriculture Policy, Sustainability and Innovation team at ICRIER. And we are really looking forward to learn from her and get the nuggets of insights from her around the sustainable agriculture. Welcome, Dr. Singh. Welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this useful podcast series.
So, Dr. Singh, before we start talking about agriculture in general, I was thinking, what was your view from the Baku and the COP29 and all the discussions and the outcomes that emerged from there, and particularly the role of the Global South and Indian government in leading a lot of those deliberations.
First, I will, start with a good positive note from the COP29, which is finally now the countries they have agreed for the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. Now, what can happen is the countries they can have, they can reduce their emissions, they can create and they can sell their emissions to different countries. So that agreement has finally reached, and by early 2025, so there is a possibility that those high emitting countries they will be able to sell and they will be able to offset their emissions, and they will be able to go towards their net zero targets, which they have committed in their NDC. So this is the positive point. And but the global south is very much disappointed with this agreement, and they have reached to Baku and with this expectation of this getting the climate funds from the rich countries and demanding 1.3 trillion USD. And in return, what they were offered was mere 300 billion USD per year by 2035. So India was leading that climate negotiation from the global south, and they have posed, India has been posed as the leader, and they have outrightly rejected this proposal. And our representative, they have said, she has said that this is mere an optical illusion. This is the term that was used, is like this, and even all other delegates and other civil bodies, they have also criticized that this finance is not sufficient because they have not even taken care of the inflation. So the net worth is still lesser. So these are the two major things I will say from COP29. One positive and another is the consensus could not be reached for the climate finance, which was the highlight of this COP. But one thing I would like to here mention that yes, it is the responsibility of the developed countries to finance the developing nations. And developed countries, they have definitely a role. For example, in India, they have just contributed to 3% of the historical emissions till date. So if India is saying, okay, how we have to grow and we have to develop, and developed countries they have to provide the finances, so that instance is correct. And having said that, still we are the ones who are suffering the most. India is the country which is actually facing a lot of climate disasters, and it is very much vulnerable to the climate changes. And agriculture is the backbone of our country, and a lot of we over 45% of the population, the working population, is dependent on agriculture. And if something is happening, then definitely we should, think that we should get finance from them, but it is also our responsibility because we are the ones who are the sufferers. This is what I will say, that we also should be generating some funds and should be taking some action. We should not be just waiting and watching. This is also I would like to add here.
Absolutely, Dr. Singh. And agriculture, in some ways, a dictomy because of climate change. While on one side,
Yeah.
it is one of the major contributors to the emission, on the other side, it also becomes very vulnerable because of the weather changes and the climate change and the pest pressures and everything. So, according to you, what are the various global approaches to sustainable agriculture that the world is taking over?
The agriculture you have rightly mentioned, like there are three, I will say, to elaborate it further, there are three interrelated challenges with respect to agriculture. First is agriculture because it is dependent, it's a biological process and it is dependent upon the weather. So it is the sector which is harmed mostly. And what we have seen is like in the situation assessment survey, 38.2% of the households they have reported the crop yield losses, and in that range, 70 to 80% of the crop losses was because of the climate. So it's a high number. So it's definitely agriculture is a vulnerable sector, and the yield losses varies from different crops to crop. In rice, they have reported 73% because of the climate change related events. And in Moong, it was around 90%, 88.9 and 90, 89%. So that's the range. And the second thing is in India, it's 13.4% of the emissions. They are coming from the agriculture. And majorly, they are coming from livestock sector and from the rice production and from the fertilizer production. So there are five categories actually. 54% of the emissions they are coming from the enteric fermentation. It's basically the belching from the bovine population. And India has the largest bovine population. It's 300 million. So that's a major contributor with respect to the agriculture emissions. And then comes rice. 17.5% of the agricultural emissions they are coming from the rice. And then 16.6% they are coming from direct emissions from the I will say from the soils for the due to the application of the nitrogen fertilizers and organic manures also, and then 5% from the indirect emissions from the agricultural soils, basically from the leaching and the volatilization. Because if we are applying the fertilizers, then what happens? Then part of the fertilizers it gets leached out, and some of them of the fertilizers it gets volatilized. I'm talking about the nitrogen fertilizers. So that portion is also there. Then 6% from the manure management and around roughly 2% from the burning of the crop residue. So that's the overall agriculture emissions from the India. So definitely it's a challenge for India because of the larger bovine population, and we have the largest rice producing area, roughly 46 million, 45, 46 million hectares. So to cut down emissions from such large population and from such large paddy area, and where the farmer land holding is very scant, they're fragmented, and the land holding side is roughly 1 hectare. So every farm, they have to, and every livestock rearer, so they have to they have to adopt all the sustainable practices. So that is the reason why India is not has not included agriculture emissions as the emissions to cut down in its NDC. They always say that agriculture emissions, they are the survival emissions for the country. So that's the stand India has taken because of these difficulties. But yes, with increasing population of India, we are the largest, most populous country, and then the food choices are also changing, and with the high income, the population is also moving towards like the even the non-vegetarian, the milk and all these dairy products. Again, if these products they will increase, then definitely the livestock sector production, the emissions, they are also going to rise. So these are the three, I will say, interrelated things with respect to the agriculture emissions. And then our policies our policies are like we are supporting a lot of like fertilizer subsidy where the urea is highly subsidized. So the farmers, they are just bearing 10% of the urea cost and 90% of the cost the government is bearing. In that sense, they are over applying urea. That is and the reason why there is high nitrous oxide emissions from the agriculture soils. So that is also the third dominant portion from where the agriculture emissions are coming from. So definitely the policies, we will talk about it maybe towards the later part of the show, maybe.
Absolutely, and I think the India's NDCs, the particularly the agriculture's breakup emissions that you shared was very interesting, and one of the point that emerged from there is around rice, and direct seeded rice is pitched as one of the alternatives to reduce those emissions and to build more sustainability into agriculture. But while we talk about it, there has also been questions around and concerns around that what should be the form of the economic incentives to drive the DSR adoption in the country. So on one side, we talk about DSR, then we have few of the multilateral organizations that are also talking about branding the rice as low carbon rice. So while on consumer side we talk about that, but I feel that somewhere we should have far more effective economic incentives built into that entire planning process for the DSR adoption. What are your thoughts on that, Dr. Singh?
See, what I will say, like in DSR adoptions, we have visited many farmers, so they are facing few challenges with DSR adoption, and that is the reason they're not adopting. And another thing that my thoughts on this is we should move away from rice in certain areas. For example, in Punjab and Haryana, where there is a very high level of environmental degradation that has happened in those areas, the groundwater table it has been declined by 11 to 12 meters, and rice it requires 20 to 25 irrigations. So if we are shifting, and then on top of it, it is also in these regions it is actually emitting 5 tons per hectare. And if we compare it with other crops like the legumes, oil seeds, it's less than 1 ton per hectare. So if we are shifting away from rice, then definitely those emissions we are saving. In DSR, we will be able to save, some water. But again, in some universities and in some areas, there are not very verifiable numbers how much water we are able to save through DSR. Because if there is some issues related to the weeds and if we are adding DSR, and the farmers they also have to add those weedicides, and that is adding cost to the farmers. But definitely there are few varieties which if we are growing, so those expenditures is not happening. So it's actually it is in, I will say it is still in the research stage. It has not moved up. Even the Punjab and Haryana government, so they have those targets of DSR, like from shifting away from DSR, and they have given the financial incentives also for moving away from them, but it's not working out. But I will also say, like shifting away from rice to other crops, also they are giving a lot of incentives. But they are giving, like for Haryana government, they are giving 17,500 per hectare. But why the farmers are not moving away from those rice to other crops is the incentive is only given one time. So if just one time they're getting that incentive, and if they're shifting away from rice, then definitely the profitability there also is getting, questioned. Then the other crops are not that profitable. So what we suggest is like repurpose the subsidies which are given for the paddy. For example, central government is giving the fertilizer subsidies to the farmers in the form of like you mainly in the form of urea, but for other NBS also they are giving. So that is one component. And the state government is giving the subsidies on power. In Punjab, it's free of cost, and in Haryana, it's 10 paisa per unit. And then they also gave those subsidies on the irrigation because for the canal water. And there are subsidies for the mechanization subsidies, like the tractors and the machineries which they are purchasing for wheat and rice, basically for rice. And for central government and state governments, they're also spending lot of money for in situ crop management. So if we club all these subsidies, so what we found like 40,000, it's actually 39,000 per hectare subsidies is going to paddy only for the cultivation of paddy. So if we are giving this subsidy, at least even if not 40,000, 35,000 we are giving, and we are giving it to other crops. Then every year if we are giving, because other crops they're not using that much fertilizer, that because paddy is using 20 to 25 irrigation and the other crops they're using just 4 5. So power subsidy, irrigation subsidy, government is saving. Paddy is using high fertilizer. Legumes, oilseeds, they're not using that fertilizer. So that fertilizer subsidy, the central government is, saving. So that subsidy we are combining and giving it to the farmers, 35,000 per hectare. Every year, the subsidy is saved. Every year, both the government, they can club together and they can give that subsidy to the farmers. That way, these crops, they can also, match up to that profitability. If not 200%, then we have to look at other routes also, because right now these crops the government is procuring, so they have the tertiary procurement. So that the cost for MSP for procurement of paddy, that can also be diverted to the procurement of these crops, because if paddy is not grown in that area, other crops are growing, so that money is also saved. So that can be used for the procurement of other crops. And then third thing is what you were saying, the financial incentives to the farmers, like if they are saving water, if they're saving that emissions, so some amount can be given to them like in the form of a carbon credit. If these things happen, and definitely they will they will match up to the profitability. This is what we have analyzed.
So that's a very interesting thought, Dr. Singh, because when we talk about the subsidy system, we always talk about the risk capital to make the farming more equitable. What we are, while in India now we are noticing is what we also need is a kind of incentive to shift from one crop to other, because that shifting crop pattern will also take care of a lot of challenges, whether it's water usage, emissions, soil health, and all the related aspects. Other thing that we hear a lot is around the stewardship requirement for the use of agrochemicals, as well as the fertilizer sector, or the crop supplement sector, nutrition sector. Uh, how do you think that that plays a role in ensuring that there is not an overuse happening, the farmer health is protected, and agriculture continue to remain climate resilient?
See, overuse of chemicals, why it is happening? It's basically because we are subsidizing those poisonous chemicals, I will say, for other fertilizers, other nutrient-based subsidies which the government is giving. Like, for example, phosphorus and potassium. So it's the 60-70% of the cost the farmer is paying. Here it's only 10% the farmer is paying. So that's the reason why the farmer is going and just buying and overusing those chemicals. And that is the reason the leaching and the volatilization is happening. It's the nitrogen use efficiency in India is just 34%. So what does that mean? It's when the farmer is applying urea, or then it's only 34% of the that is being used by the plant. Rest, what is happening? It's just getting, it's some of them like 20%, 25% it gets leased out, 10% it gets volatilized. Like that, it happens.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I suggest is instead of just giving these subsidies, what we propose we can have the entire amount given to the farmers in the form of a direct cash transfer, so that farmers they are able to use it. Right now, they don't have choice because they have the subsidized. fertilizers, even if they want to buy any other chemicals, any other fertilizer, that is expensive, that
Mhm.
is cheap. If the subsidy is not given to the fertilizers, instead of subsidizing, to the those urea industry, they will give, if the government is giving the money to the farmers, they can actually buy what they want to use, even the sustainable products. Now, the sustainable product, the bioproducts, they are not at all subsidized. Yes, in different schemes, the farmers are providing, the government is providing to farmers like the vermicompost, they're providing like this norm that Jeevamrit and all those biofertilizers. That is on different scheme level. But otherwise, there is no subsidies that is being provided to the bio inputs.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely, Dr. Singh. And as Corteva, we have always said that it should be the choice of the farmer of the product that they
Yeah,
want to use. And we need to put that choice back in their hands and in their mobile phones, probably, with mobile being such
yeah.
an important, equity creation tool for a lot of sectors and areas. The other thing that, what we are seeing, as we just touched upon the biologicals portfolio, is that how do we ensure the biological products that are being used are the right product that reaches the farmer, and it is also reaches them in a more accelerated manner? A lot of time, and not just in agriculture, I think this happens everywhere, regulation is usually trailing behind innovation. And we see that in digital, we see that in semiconductor, healthcare, and agriculture is no, outlier in that kind of trend analysis. How do we make sure that the new technologies, like the latest seed technologies, the biologicals, the nitrogen optimizers to reduce dependency on the traditional fertilizers, how do we make sure that this regulation is not left behind and our farmers continue to get the or access to all the latest technology in a timely manner?
What you are saying is very correct and relevant because this NAR system, National Agriculture Research System, see, they have launched around 2000 climate resilient varieties. But when we go to the fields, still the farmers, their experiences, they have no clue. So those new technologies, they are not reaching to the farmers. Extension people, they definitely they have to work in hand with those government laboratories, and they have to ensure that is one thing. Another thing is we have also seen in biologicals like FCO, there's a regulation, the biological fertilizers, they are controlled under FCO. But then those guidelines, some, they are not updated.
Mhm.
They are just obsolete, I will say. So they are not definitely into, they're not, I will say, the advanced. So definitely they need to be updated.
Mhm.
Farmers, they are not getting much. It's they are only getting the advanced technologies and other things only in the form of schemes, which the government is announcing time to time. Like they have, government has announced Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, where they are getting actually the sprinkler and the drip irrigation system. They have launched this National Horticulture Mission, National Integrated Horticulture Mission. So where they are able to create all that protected greenhouse facilities for the cultivation of their crops, even the high yielding varieties, they are getting through those schemes. But apart from the schemes, it's, I will say that it is also the responsibility of the private players to, just handhold the farmers and for the seed, like they have done enormously good. So all those high yielding varieties, those hybrids, it's the seed industries which have reached to the farmers and they have catered to the need of the farmers. So as has been done in the seed and as done in the case of the even the machinery, so there are many different machineries which have been reached to the farmers. So similarly, for other things. The only thing which I can think at this stage is there has to be a private and public partnership model, because we cannot think that everything, the government will be doing. Although the government is also not doing great, I will say, because the agriculture research intensity of our country is just 0.45%, which is, it should be more than 1% and at least 2% in different the developed countries, and it's high, but in India it's very low. So the I'm not denying the role of the public institutions, but in other countries the research in agriculture by private players is very high. In India, it definitely requires a lot of investment from the private players too. They should increase an investment, and the government, they can provide some incentives to the industries. For example, PLI, they give it to other industries. So some incentives so that the private players, they are able to invest in India for the agriculture sector for these sustainable technologies. This is what I can suggest.
Absolutely, and I think the PLI equivalent for
Yeah.
agriculture RP is something that should be a focus area. And as you rightly said, the complexity of the challenge is so huge that there has to be a sustainable interest and continuous interest and continuous funding, and that will require some kind of handshake and handholding, both by the public as well as the private sector, where we just continue to change who is applying risk capital to what extent, and then bring it to the farmers. One of the things that we do as part of our CSR initiative is looking at the gamut of all kind of different policies and schemes available
Mm.
for a particular cluster. We work with the FPOs that we support and simplify it for the farmer at the grassroots level. That, see, there are, let's say, 80 different schemes available. This will be applicable, or you will be eligible if you do
Yeah.
this or that and that. And we have seen some really good interest from farmers because they are also at some level very confused. Or rather, I would say that awareness is not up to the par, where they look for something like a simple checklist that if I'm growing crop A, I am eligible to get financial incentives under scheme XYZ. And a lot of our grassroots partners have been working on that. And one of the scheme, or one of the question that comes out very often nowadays, is around the carbon credit potentials, the crops that it will be available for, to what extent, what would be the mechanism, whether it's going to be a DBT, is it going to be linked to some other incentive or action around it, and the overall, the way that ecosystem will work always remain the enigma to a lot of people, even within who are very much well embedded into the system, agriculture ecosystem. So, what are your thoughts around that, Dr. Singh?
See, carbon credits for agriculture is a tough one for India. As of now, I mean, although India has given the guidelines for this carbon credit scheme, but for the energy sector, it's very straightforward. Like if you're moving away from the fossil fuel to this renewable and other things, it's very easy to calculate how much is the saving. But with respect to agriculture, it's very difficult to measure, because until and unless you measure and quantify and validate, this is the saving that has been happened in this particular sector. On what basis the credits will be, created? It won't be. For example, I will say, like, for example, the projects that are being successful from the agriculture sector is mostly in the agroforestry area, because there we have those trees, and then on the basis of the sequestration potential, that is, how much carbon is generated in those trees, the credits are given to the farmers. So that has happened. Those models are successful. But if we talk about, like you said, like which crops, like if we want to include rice there, like, there are many, like you mentioned about AWD, there are other methods, alternate wetting and drying techniques. And then if you're reducing the fertilizers, again, it will reduce the fertilizers. If you're reducing the energy consumption, it will again reduce the emission level. And then if you're going for the conservation agriculture, you're doing the zero tillage, no tillage, then again there is a saving. But how to measure it? Like if farmer has watered it in on one day, on many days, okay, the farmer has not watered. So continuous monitoring has to be done. And the tilling, if just one day there is a tilling activity is there in the field, whatever soil the carbon has been stored, it gets released. So, the first thing is to get implemented all these verification and these measurement models. It has to be first established. And then only, it's a very, I will say, it's a tedious process. Like there are many carbon credit agencies, like Vera is one of them. They are doing all those certification. So they have those methodologies already established. But the point with this carbon credit mechanism is the accountability. Who is actually accountable for the carbon credits, and particularly if the carbon credits, the carbon is it's of a poor quality, then what happens? So all these things, I mean, they will emerge definitely with time, and the mechanisms need to be established. And as of now, it is the voluntary carbon, and it is moving as per the demand of the market demand, right? So we do not have a fixed value to the carbon. It ranges, like many companies, they offer 15, 20 USD per hectare, per ton of the carbon. So that is another point. Whether we should go for the ETS emission trading system where or we impose a tax or we should go for the voluntary. So these are the things which are emerging and it needs to be streamlined.
So while we were talking about the sustainability in agriculture, Dr. Singh, what are the current research areas for the APSI team at ICRIER? What are the latest challenges that you are tackling?
What we're I will talk about the sustainability group, which in the APSI, which we are tackling. We are looking at the repurposing strategies for the different kind of the support that the government is providing to the farmers, because some of the support is positive with respect to the environment, some of the support is neutral to the environment, and some of the support is negative and some has a mixed impact. So this is what currently we have studied actually, like the fertilizer subsidy, power subsidy. We find it like they are not very positive to the environment with respect to the soil, water, air, and biodiversity. So we have these. If we talk about the sustainability pillar, so there are three things like the environmental sustainability, the economic sustainability, and the social sustainability. So we are trying to look at the policies which in all the three pillars, and it has to be sustainable with respect to the environment. It's sustainable with respect to the economics and sustainable with respect to the social framework. And then the fertilizer and the power subsidy, we find it little negative. And then there are some, like we have those income supporting schemes and budgetary support like PM Kisan, where the 6,000 rupees provided to the farmer. Then we have the crop insurance scheme. There's so many other schemes which are supporting the income. So they have the neutral impact on the farmer, on the environment. And then we have some many schemes like the sustainable agriculture related objective schemes, Krishi Unnati Yojana, Rashtriya Krishi Vikas Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai, and so many other schemes and other subsidies which are positive. And then some of the schemes they have the mixed impacts, like at one end, like for the social sustainability point of view, from the scheme is very good, the subsidy is very good, but that is impacting the environment. So, like that, we have done the categorization and we have also kind of looked at what is the extent of damage, the policies and all these subsidies are making to the environment with respect to different. elements of environment.
But that's very interesting research area actually, evaluating and identifying the damages that has been happening, or it's instigated more by the subsidy system and blatant use of the products that should not be used beyond a limit. And while we are working, while you are working on these, what are the various lessons that you could share with us while working with the government and the various multilateral and bilateral agencies in forming a very cohesive policy development in for sustainable agriculture?
Yeah, we are trying to, on the basis of this, we are trying to develop the repurposing strategies. It is not just, documenting and finding out the damages that has happened, but how that we can, undo. I will say not undo, but at least kind of restore the damage, and how we can do it by repurposing. So our experience, I will say, was quite good. Like we have consulted with different stakeholders, the academic institutions, the farmers, then the policymakers, different government people. So we found it quite, they were very open to it. And we have jointly under like this scheme which I was mentioning to you, the 35,000 per hectare, the 40,000 per hectare in Punjab and Haryana, that, that was quite nicely accepted by them. And then in Punjab, the central and the state government, they have jointly launched the scheme, definitely, but not 35,000 per hectare. They have announced for 17,500 per hectare for 1 year. So this is one scheme that they have announced. We will just keep working with them and try to give them the awareness. So what is the thing where they can they can correct themselves and they can repurpose the same money. See, in our project, the beauty of the project is we are not telling the government, we are not telling anybody to put extra penny.
Mhm.
The whatever money is there. We are just trying to just repurpose it. We are just trying to reorient it so that the sustainability goal is achieved. This is this is the main point. And to this, we found like the farmers, the academicians, the policymakers, or other value chain players, they are on board because we are not talking of any extra money in that. We are just trying to just build the ecosystem there where the same money is going to the better outcome and the better output.
Mhm. I think that's a very valid point that a lot of the sustainability related discussions that academia focus on is also more towards repurposing the same funds, or rather, or we can also say that extracting a better value of the each dollar spent on that, so that it remains viable, it remains sustainable, and it also result give better results. uh, Before we end, Dr. Singh, any parting thoughts?
I just want to say that sustainability is something that is there in agenda of everybody, including government, and lot of schemes and lot of initiatives they're announcing. And another thing is that what they should add in their kitty is, the mitigation goal from the agriculture sector. Currently, the focus is on adaptation. We understand that we are in India, agriculture sector is vulnerable, so action on agenda should be there. But as the agriculture emissions are growing, and it's important that we should also keep our mitigation focus. So they should go hand in hand, not just the adaptation part. And all these things can only happen if we just take care of the farmers' profitability. Because if we are just saying sustainability, standalone thing, without taking the farmers' income profitability into account, then we will not be achieve that particular goal. So it sustainability, it includes the farmer sustainability, economic sustainability also. This is what I will say.
Absolutely, Dr. Singh. I think in a lot of deliberations that we are noticing right now in agriculture is that farmer and particular farmer prosperity is at the center of that, because that ensures whether all the initiatives, or
Yeah,
the the tools and the tricks that will be applied stay viable and stay sustainable, rather than becoming just one-off kind of exercise. And to our audience today, we had a very enriching discussion with Dr. Singh today, where we spoke about and we discussed the illusion of optical illusion, or rather the disillusionment of the optical illusion that has happened at the COP29 in Baku this year. Then we touched upon the DSR and what really needs to be done, and not just with DSR, but many other crops, where a lot of the inputs that go into the agriculture will need far more stewardship, reassessment of the subsidization and the subsidy policy, to also evaluate whether they are continue to be being effective or not. Carbon credits could be one of the mechanisms, but it also needs a little bit of demystification. And most importantly, that we will need to work together, both the public and the private sector, where we follow a matrixed environment kind of approach, and we continue to have trust into each other's systems to ensure that this complex challenge of sustainable agriculture, my apologies, the complex challenge of impact on agriculture due to climate change is being taken care of. So, with those parting notes, Dr. Singh, thank you so much for joining us today. It was truly a very enriching experience to interact and learn from your insights.
thank you
Thank you.
so much. My pleasure.